Hi everyone, my name is Fawaz, and today in this tutorial we will be talking about some of the steps that we can do to ensure that we can run our macros more quickly. And this is for probabilistic sensitivity analysis that is quite helpful for anyone who's doing economic modeling or any sort of modeling that involves distributions. Before we start, it's very important that if you're not familiar with some of the VBA codes, I found this very easy website online which says Excel Easy. If you type it in the Google, it will probably pop up, and you can learn how to do some basic one loop, two-dimensional loops, or do loop while with a certain kind of condition. Second is to ensure that when we are doing a PS analysis, we have a set of parameter values defined within a parameter sheet. And we also have an if statement which defines a cell range to pick up a value from if you are using beta, gamma, or log normal. So you have this range of cell within that sheet to allow you to change distribution from your deterministic values to probabilistic values, and I'll just show you in a couple of minutes that how we can see if that's already the case with our sheets. So I have this certain modeling exercise that I have done before, and I have this parameter sheet named parameters, and I have all these parameters already defined with Dirichlet or other similar gamma distributions, and there's a random draw here. And I have a certain if statement that basically locks, with the dollar sign, you basically lock that certain cell range, and if you change it from 0 to 1, it will basically give you different values in your defined cell formula range for probabilities, utilities or costs. So I've defined this as 1, that if I select 1 for this E4 column here, all my values would shift to random distributions from my defined distribution, which is either beta or log normal or gamma. And in order to check that if that's perfectly changing fine, you just select F9 and see that all the values are changing just for a sec before you start up with your macros. So the first step is to record a macro, and how we're going to do that, we're just going to select our PSA sheet where we're going to set up all our variation of different parameters that we're allowed to vary in this analysis. So I've taken up all my utilities and probabilities as well as costs, and then I have this column for costs and collies that are basically getting picked up from the analysis sheet here. And what that does is that every time Excel would do a random draw for other distributions that you've chosen, it would give you new sets of costs and quality adjusted life years that you can use to calculate your incremental outcomes and then net monetary benefits. But within this macro, we won't be going into details of how you do the net monetary benefits and calculate them, but rather about how we can set up all this for 1,000 simulation trials and how we can speed up that process. So the first step is to find a certain symbol or a button that you want to define your macro for. So it's very easy to do that. You just go to insert and find a certain shape or icons, and then you can just simply insert it here like I've done it here. And what I do with this is that I right click this and I assign it a certain macro. So I already recorded a macro, but just to show that how we do it is we go to view here and we record a macro and we name it something, like for PSA I click OK or PSA1, and then I just stop recording here. And when I'm assigning a macro, then I'm just assigning with whatever I've recorded here. So I recorded a macro before which was named PSA. I select that and then the macro is automatically defined here. What we need to do now is to view our macro, and I'm just going to edit it, and this has already been defined, so I'm just gonna take this all off and start from scratch. So the first thing is that we want to change our analysis to probabilistic, and how that works is that I'm gonna select my parameter sheet here, I'm gonna select my range of cell where I can change the value of it to become more become probabilistic instead of deterministic. So that for me that range was E4 on the parameter sheet, and I will select that with the quotation marks. And then for this active cell, I'm going to change the formula to R1C1, and I'm going to put that as 1. So this will basically change my analysis to probabilistic. The second step is to define how many trials I want. So I start by doing this by defining as an index value of 0 and trials 1000. We will talk about the index later on, because this is how you copy the existing formula range into the other ranges to have it done 1,000 times. And before we do that, we are just gonna call another sub here, right? Call and turn off things that we will do later on once we're done with this. So for our existing macro, we want our cell ranges to be copied from B to Z, and from B10 and Z10 all the way down to B1012 or whatever range that you have selected. So in order to do that, a simple way of doing is just to know these ranges and select sheets, and I know that this sheet is a PSA sheet. I'm going to select it. I'm going to select the range, and for me the range is the preceding range. So the preceding range where I want the values to be copied would be this, and I want to offset this range every time a new trial is run. So I offset it to index value and column value of 0, and I just want the value in this range to be equal to the range of my formula range, which is my previous row from B10 to Z10, because that I have all the values stored for the formulas. And that would help Excel copy the range every time from a new random draw distribution. So for that, it's P10 to Z10, and I just want the value from this range to be offset. In order for it to offset, I have to set my index equal to index plus 1. So every time a new trial is run, we move another row down. So this is what that formula does. So I also want my application status bar to show me something, that how many trials I'm running. So for that, I set my application status bar equals to, maybe let's call it simulation, and I have some space, and what I want in the middle is the index number to show it's the whole thing. So yeah, you write what you want in the start, and this thing has to be without quotation marks, and then what you want the total of trials to be. So that can be 1,000 or 5,000, depends on how much you're running. And then we define this function loop while index or less than trials because we want our sub macro or this macro to stop doing it when we reach 1,000 trials, and if you don't do that, then it would keep on going forever. And then we're gonna call turn on things that we turned off before, and then we want to change our analysis back to deterministic. And then we end this up. So now we start with the sub where we want turn on things, and we want these to turn off things first. So we want application display alerts to be off, so we set it to false. We want application screen updating to be false. We want to switch off data table calculations, because if you have huge amount of data tables and what if analysis already being stored, then that basically causes your macro to or simulation to run more time, because every time a new distribution is being picked out, Excel would recalculate every single thing, and so we want to shut that off through this calculation, but we're going to set this to Excel semi-automatic. And then we also want to shut off any graphs that are there, because if you're doing a big project, you would have a huge amount of graphs that you want to limit. So for that, we have to define single loops or double dimension loops. For that, you can check out the VBA Codes website to find that in detail. So for I to 1, we count how many sheets there are. And then we define the same for the amount of shapes that we might have if we have any graphs or diagrams or pie charts. So 1 to active sheet shapes count. Shapes are there. We also want to make those shapes invisible, and for that we have to use this formula here, and then we need to do that for all the shapes and for all the all the sheets that we have. So we select next, so it would do it for all the sheets that Excel has counted, and then you end this sub and you start a new sub with to check the formulas every time you're doing this. So turn on things, make sure you have the right spellings there, and then you basically take all of this and you want to turn it on again. So set it to true, set this to Excel automatic, and I must have turned this to true, and then you end your sub here. You end the sub macro over here. So what we're doing here is basically we're turning off all the data table calculation, like for instance if you have any cost effectiveness, acceptability or frontiers, but Excel will do it every time it runs a new trial. It recalculates every single thing. So I figured this out by doing all these things and turning off all these alerts and graphic calculation, but keeping the analysis calculation to be accounted for. We can make our macro run much faster, and it's very helpful because within the exams, or if you're doing a large project with a lot of simulation, it would take a lot of time within Excel to do that. So just make sure when you're doing this, you have the right names for the sheets and everything that you're using, because otherwise Excel would probably give you an error for that. So let's see. errors, and there was some error with the parameters and not using the right name of the sheets. So I cleared everything out, and let's run this macro by clicking the button in the PSA sheet that we assigned the macro for, and we can see that it's running much faster. I think approximately would take 20-30 seconds to complete all the simulation with all these alerts off, or faster, depends on what else you have running on the computer, but definitely much faster than if you had everything turned on in the start. So yeah, it's already done. So we have all our data calculation, we have our deterministic analysis set back, and if you really want to recalculate your data tables now, you can just do F9 and then it would redo it. It has already turned it on, but in case, you just have to do it every time your calculation kind of ends. So this was all from the tutorial, and thank you for looking into this, and maybe if someone learns more VBA and can make some additional changes, maybe it would run even faster, but this was just the kind of editing that I did for myself while searching online and looking for different options. And I think since most of the people are using Excel for their thesis or their projects, it's much faster to run macro if you turn things off and turn them back on, but having some of the calculations being calculated for analysis and other things. And so I hope this helps everyone, and thank you very much.